I'm Sandy Leong. I'm an associate trainer with the Director of Social Change, and I'm delivering this session on managing remote staff, the new normal, as part of the Espresso Express online learning support. Now, working remotely from home is your normal work going ahead as usual, but in a different place. And I think it's always worth keeping that in mind. We've still got to achieve what we've got to achieve. And it can be a challenge and both an opportunity for both staff and for managers. And for a manager, managing a remote team maybe for the first time, it can be a challenge, and there will, of course, be obstacles to overcome. This new normal, as we're calling it, maybe will last for a long time, we don't know. But you need to manage the work efficiently as you did before. You need to put in robust systems in place, perhaps better ones than you had before, both in management structures and in technology. And you need to review your preferred management style, how you managed before, and perhaps tweak it a bit. So here are some things for you to think about to make the most of this challenge. The first and most important, of course, is to harness the power of technology, and you maybe have to invest in some for your organisation. This is going to be the backbone of your survival. Provide time for training on whatever technology you decide to use. Some will be more comfortable with it than others. Decide what works for your staff and for your organisation. We're fortunate at the moment that there's plenty of it around. Can you imagine doing this 10 years ago and trying to deal with it by telephone and email? We're fortunate that we've got things like Microsoft Office 365, Zoom, which I'm using now, Slack, WhatsApp, and others, of course, that can bring staff together. Some like Office 365 Teams are more sophisticated, and you'll be able to manage and share work through those. But you do need to fine tune your management style in this time. What worked well in an office situation may not work so well when you're managing remote workers. And you're perhaps all familiar with this slide, the diagram of management styles. And you can see here down at the bottom, we've got TEL, the TEL style where the manager makes the decision and announces it. We've got the SEL style, where the manager makes the decision but explains why the decision's been made and why it needs to be done in a certain way. Then we've got the consult style, where manager will get suggestions for ideas of how to solve a problem, but will first put out the parameters of what the discussion is going to be about, but then will make the decision themselves. And then we have share, which again, the manager would set out the parameters of the issue, the problem, the decision to be made, and allow the group to decide, to come to a collective decision. And of course, the last one is delegate. And delegate is really important in this particular new normal, because if we delegate stuff to staff and leave them unsupported to do it, it may lead to demotivation and anxiety. So delegation, when you're working with remote staff, needs to be done really well by setting out limits and expectations of how staff are going to perform the task. So as a manager, you always have to be nimble, going up and down that management continuum and using different styles with different situations and with different staff members. Think about who you're managing when you decide on which style you're going to use. So think about, where do you think you spend most of your time in those different styles, and decide if this will be the best way to work in this new situation. And then we look at the task, the team, and the individual or the group needs. And you have to make sure these are all covered as well. The task, the allocating of responsibilities, and setting performance standards around those. The individual needs, maybe people need some coaching and stuff, maybe something to in terms of supporting them, and certainly supervision. And bringing the group together or the team together finding ways of motivating them and continuing to build the team. So you have to find a new way of doing it or tweak the way that you did it before, because it all still needs to be in place. Now, you've probably seen this, good old Hertzberg's motivation theory. And I like using this one because it's quite practical, I think. So we've got the motivating factors on one side, but he also talks about the hygiene factors, and that's stuff that's got to be in place to allow motivation to take place. Now, if you look at that, I'm not going to go through them all, but I wanted to draw your attention to the hygiene factors because one is working conditions. And when staff are working in the office, you have control over the working conditions. You can make sure that they are safe and correct. When people are working from home, you don't have control over it. However, you should do some risk assessment or get staff to do some risk assessment on their working environment. And I would advise you to visit the HSE website for the free risk assessment sheets on this. And just looking at the motivation factors, you can work on all these, but you need to put more effort into them while people are working from home. Remember, some staff members will take to working from home and view it as an opportunity, while others may struggle with this new normal. So take time to discuss with each of your staff members what they specifically need to make this work for them. You might find staff who were previously self-starters in the office are not so much when they are not in the office environment. Some may be anxious about how it will work. And of course, for some organisations, they will have changed their focus on the work that they're doing during this time. And we also need to consider the culture, often called the way we do things around here. And this is about looking at how did people behave when they were working together in the office. And if we look at it in a bit more detail, organisational culture, and we talk about a shared set of values and beliefs of what is important to people and the organisation. And then we've got the norms that guide people's behaviour, suggesting what is or isn't appropriate, i.e. the done thing. Things like dress codes, showing up on time to meetings or not, when breaks are taken, if the staff take lunch breaks. And then we've got the symbols and symbolic actions that make the final leg of organisational culture. And these are things like the office rituals, things like, do the staff buy a cake for the rest of the staff when it's their birthday? Or do they go out for a drink together at the end of the week? You need to identify these symbols and try and recreate it as much as possible whilst they're working remotely. The trick is to create something virtually that replicates the office atmosphere. If your staff group would normally celebrate Friday, then do something online every Friday. And the real key point here is every Friday, not just when you feel like it. Have a Friday catch-up with tea and cakes. Of course, it's bring your own cake, but maybe you can have a competition to see who's got the best one every week. Whatever it is, the idea is to have fun and bring the team together. If your team are not the partying type, then at least bring them together and have a sign-off at the end of the week. Finding reasons to bring them together is really important to keep everybody feeling they're part of the organisation. Try and replicate your organisation's culture by the way you manage. In fact, you can make it better. And set out your expectations of what your staff can expect from you and what you expect of them. Share your vision of success at this time and how each staff member is going to be able to contribute to it. Discuss your expectations about everything, much more than you would have done when you were all in the office together. Perhaps about meetings, when, how often, how many are scheduled, or what's the way that they can have an unscheduled meeting. Talk about the time to expect in responding to emails. and that is from you and from them. And telephone calls. Try and use the telephone as a preferred method of communication rather than just pinging emails across. Try and put a face to what you want to know or ask. And communicate really well, perhaps even over communicate. Remember, all the information that is passed on informally when you're all together in an office just won't happen anymore. Set up a plan for communicating. A timetable for check-ins, maybe the beginning of the week, the beginning of the day, or the end of the week. Make sure that people know when you're available for informal meetings or to answer quick questions. They can't just drop by your desk anymore and say, oh, what about? They've got to send you an email or ring you. And that sometimes feels like a big deal, doesn't it? Where you could have just asked as you're walking through the office. So make sure that you encourage people to ring you and set times aside for when you can take these little questions, perhaps we could call them. And also, while this is all happening, invest in your developing your staff, certainly to better understand the technology that they're now having to use, but also for personal development. Look out for webinars that staff can engage in. And set boundaries and expectations. Expectations that staff will look like they would normally look like if they were in the office. Make sure you do most of your communications by video, and then there is definitely a need for people to get out of their pajamas, including yourself. Getting ready for work and showing up is actually proven to be people will be much more engaged in work than if they get to their desk or their kitchen table in their pajamas. So set your expectations out, but also share and discuss expectations about work-life balance. Be clear about what time you expect people to start work. Maybe have a round of good mornings as you would as people appeared in the office. Insist your staff take a lunch break, so take one yourself. Tell them each day what time this will be and encourage your staff to do the same. And check out with staff at the end of the day, at the time everybody should finish work. This is not about not trusting people, but insisting that staff have a work-life balance, and perhaps it could be better than the one they had before. But remember, working from home can leave some people feeling isolated, anxious, and possibly demotivated. But the good news is you don't have to be Superman or Wonder Woman. And it would be incredibly uncomfortable if you had to wear those outfits all day, wouldn't it? You just need to set up an atmosphere of trust. Communicate well, and perhaps you'll think that you're over-communicating during this period. Plan for the week, the month, and beyond. People will be anxious to know what's happening after this situation changes. Define expectations. Share your vision. Share your vision of where you're working towards. And of course, make time for social interactions between yourself and your staff. So thank you from me, Sandy Leong, and from the DSC for tuning in to our Espresso Express online learning support. Make sure that you share it with others and have a look out for further information and resources.